So Craig, I want to start by just give us, we're very much, everybody here is interested in financial inclusion. I know MasterCard's been doing a lot. So put us in the moment, circa 2019, you're President North America. What does financial inclusion look like to you right now?
Well, first, thanks for having me here. It's great to have an opportunity to chat a little bit on the topic of financial inclusion. Let me start with that, start answering that question with a little bit of why financial inclusion is so important to us at MasterCard. And then I'll come back to North America and the US specifically. We, at the core of what we do at MasterCard, we connect buyers and sellers all over the world to facilitate payments in ways that enable businesses to grow, commerce to expand, economies to prosper. And with that, people are more successful in being able to start businesses, create jobs, have the kind of economic prosperity for them and their families that enable them to pursue their dreams. So that's sort of at the core of what it is we do with our business. But obviously, for that to have as broad an impact as possible, people need to be participating in ways that they actually benefit from that. So we have a real deep belief at MasterCard that we have a role to play in bringing more and more people into the financial mainstream by connecting them to one of the networks that powers the modern economy, and one of those is the electronic payments system. And so we had set many years ago an objective to bring 500 million people around the world into the financial mainstream by connecting them to electronic payments products and enable 100 million or more businesses to be able to be connected into our network as well. A lot of that work in the early days focused on the emerging world, a lot in Africa, Asia, Latin America, but it became very clear to us that there is as much of a need right here in the US and in other developed markets as well to apply the same kind of principles, but do it in ways that make sense for the market.
So it looks very different here, though.
It does look different, and that's where we had to start, was honestly taking a step back and spending some time trying to understand how are the needs in a place like the United States different from other parts of the world where we were already active. And we spent a lot of time in cities around the country, meeting with civic leaders, with religious leaders, with government officials, with other members of the private sector, education institutions, just to understand what are the issues, particularly the issues facing cities, because they're such a microcosm of our society and have all the various needs of our society represented in cities. And we learned some very important things that are unique, at least different from what we see elsewhere in the world. One is, I think, the scope of the challenge is different. And while we certainly have economically distressed communities that are persistently distressed, we have the challenges that immigrant groups face, persistent unemployment in certain segments of society. There's also a very distinct set of challenges that the middle class faces. And maybe not something you typically associate with financial inclusion, because you think of the middle class as being financially included, but there's a risk of backsliding. And that's something that we became acutely aware of, some of the challenges of the struggling middle class. A second difference is there are so many organizations in the US that are focused on trying to help, doing really great work in different areas to work their particular aspects of financial inclusion, but there's not a lot of connectivity in many instances between.
So it's more a challenge than an opportunity? Is it like because you can sprinkle fairy dust, right, and just
You can sprinkle fairy dust, but it seemed to us as we were poking around that there was an opportunity to get more impact by connecting some of these efforts and sharing information and sharing data and sharing learnings across organizations rather than working independently in silos. And a third difference is really just the availability of infrastructure through which to deliver programs and the availability of information and data to make more informed decisions that you don't necessarily have in an emerging market in Africa or someplace like that.
So let me go back to your first point, which is the need for financial literacy, financial inclusion, because we do tend to associate it, obviously, with underserved, marginalized communities. When you talk about the middle class, you talk about wage struggles. There's also the gig economy,
right.
And we've seen technology be, as much viewed as a problem as a solution right now. So talk about that particular class because it's growing.
Right.
The independent workers, the entrepreneurs we just saw. What are the challenges there and what are you doing?
Well, I think there's an interesting, the angle around the gig economy and the future of work, and we've spent a lot of time thinking about trying to understand the future of work and how we can play a role in facilitating some of the changing dynamics in the workforce and how people are adapting to that. One thing that's clear is the gig economy is it's an important part of our economy, and it's here to stay. Some estimates of up to a third of the workforce is engaged in some kind of gig employment. Not all of the gig workers are facing inclusion issues or are financially distressed, but a sizable portion are. And the challenges are driven really by two things. One is variability and unpredictability of income,
Right.
matched up against a fixed and predictable set of expenses typically. And the mismatch in income and expenses and the challenges that creates for household budgeting and just managing financial affairs is significant. And that's something where we've been able to work with partners to create, using technology, to create some new products to be able to assist people in those circumstances. So for example, we work with partners like Lyft, obviously an important employer in the gig economy, Care.com, another important employer in the gig economy, to provide products, financial products to their employees that enable them to be effectively paid by the shift. A Lyft driver can get paid after every trip if they want to. They can get paid up to 4 or 5 times a day.
Through this debit card or what? How do you do that?
It's a debit product that enables the funds to be loaded onto the card. They can then, so that they can manage their income and their cash flow as they need it, as opposed to waiting for 2 weeks or however long it might be to get a check. And then we can complement that with some digital tools to enable things like household budgeting, to be able to manage income and expense flows, to be able to forecast given expectations around the number of shifts or trips that they'll be taking. How does the income match up against the expense that they'll be incurring so that they can budget, make sure that they have enough available to cover expenses, and even reserve a portion of that income to fund savings, to promote healthy financial habits related to savings.
So, you know, financial inclusion and literacy is the very definition of a wicked problem. There's no easy fix. We've heard a lot about that here. There's a lot of inspiration. At the same time, there's a lot of recognition that the problems aren't going away. So I want to talk about advice that you have for different groups. And you've done a lot with government. You've done, I think, 1,000 projects with government. There's a lot of people from government in the audience. Give me some sense as to, first of all, some stories as to how you've worked with government. For example, you have several years now with the federal government and payments, and what role that has in inclusion.
Well, you can't overstate the importance of government in being a partner, and in really the role that government plays in shaping the environment in which people like us in the private sector can then step in to play an important role and ultimately, hopefully, come together in the kinds of public-private partnerships that we often talk about and don't often see enough of. But we have experience working with government at the federal, state, local level in the US and with a number of governments around the world. And there's a couple of things that I think are consistent ingredients for success. And they're things that we're trying to capitalize on. One is the importance of government, I think, to recognize the contribution that the private sector can make in addressing some of the challenges with respect to financial inclusion, and recognize that by creating policies and creating an environment and a framework in which the private sector can be encouraged to invest and participate and collaborate, both with government and with each other, in ways that serve the social aims that government is seeking to serve, but also provide an opportunity for the private sector to benefit. And that doesn't mean extract exorbitant rents and make massive profits. I can tell you we do a lot of things in the realm of financial inclusion that don't deliver the financial return that we see elsewhere in our business. It delivers significant other returns, which I'll come to a little bit later. But government plays a role in shaping that and creating the playing field to encourage that investment. There's another benefit, a tremendous benefit in sharing information across. And what we see in our work, particularly with cities, we work very frequently with cities on the issues that are prevalent in urban environments. Cities all around the world are facing the same challenges. And there's great benefit in collaborating on what the problems are, actually framing the problems, and then bringing together the right consortium of partners to start to tackle those problems. And we've created a venue or a forum for that, something we call City Possible, which is really a convening mechanism. And we're working now with more than 30 cities around the world, and that continues to grow. And it's primarily the mayors of the cities, or in some cases, chief information officers who are tasked with the technology strategy of the city, working with us, some educational institutions, academic institutions, and other private sector partners to tackle some of these challenges, test solutions in certain cities, and see where we can cross-pollinate them elsewhere.
Can you give me some examples of solutions? So let's say I'm a mayor. Why do I want to work with you? And can you give me some sense as to sort of what success looks like, even particular cases that you think are heartening, and maybe a sense of helping us look around the corner for what we'll see more of?
Yeah. So why would you want to work with us? And it's not just us, by the way. There's lots of great companies. We firmly believe there's a really important role for the private sector and large companies in particular to play in investing behind social impact issues. Why play with us? We've got a lot of resources. We've got a lot of technology. We've got products. We have data. We have people. And we have capital. All things that are important in obviously being able to invest in solutions. We aim to channel those towards things that we know align with what it is we're capable of doing, given the nature of our technology and our products and our data. And with respect to cities, we've kind of gravitated around 3 or 4 areas in particular, some of which is what you would expect of MasterCard. It's helping cities, which are big economic entities in and of themselves, just manage the inflow and outflow of funds more effectively by facilitating payments, collections of receipts, and disbursements that cities make to different constituents. That's kind of what we do every day. But there are other areas where we've identified where we can make a difference working with cities, in particular related to issues related to mobility, urban mobility, and enhancing the efficiency of transit systems. We do a lot of work with transit systems around the world to improve the efficiency of their payments.
We're about to New York to do the contactless.
Contactless is a part of it, but
does that help inclusion?
It does. In that a lot of transit systems run off of closed-loop proprietary payment systems. You have to go buy an MTA card in New York, and you have to load up a certain amount of value on it, and it's inconvenient, and it's a costly system for the MTA and other transit systems to run. They migrate that to the kind of payment system where MasterCard products can run on that, and particularly contactless, where you just tap and you go through the turnstile quickly. It takes a lot of cost out of the system. We've worked with the Transit Authority in London and have reduced their operating expenses by £100 million. That's all money that can get reinvested in improving transit, which might be improving the frequency of trains. It might be extending a bus line into a neighborhood that's underserved. And anyone who's in municipal government knows the impact, the economic impact on a neighborhood of increasing access to mass transit. It's massive in terms of providing opportunities for people to get to employment and that sort of thing. So that's a really important area. We're doing a lot of work with cities around helping them improve decision-making around where to spend money. Cities, like all the rest of us, have limited resources to invest. Using our data, we can help cities understand what's the economic impact of a variety of different decisions. What's the impact of refurbishing a park? How does that change the economic profile of the neighborhood? What's the impact of providing some incentives to bring an anchor tenant into a retail center, a strip mall that might be on the decline? What's the impact of things like extending that bus line or a transit line into a new neighborhood?
So there's so many things that everybody's trying to do. Are there particular things that you feel move the needle? So for example, with government, one of the things about that is you you can force people, right? With the federal government, if you want to get payments, you digitize it. You're essentially forcing people to come into the system in order to get their payments, which is can be very powerful. Have you looked at the ripple effects of some of the different initiatives that you've done? And, can you give some advice as to what you think is particularly moves the needle, or particular tools that we should focus our energy on?
Well, I think, you mentioned the role of government in sort of quote-unquote forcing. They're encouraging people to...
You want to get paid?
Yeah, there are two ways to get paid, and ACH, this is the way the U.S. federal government now just distributes social benefits. You either get an ACH transfer into your bank account, or if you don't have a bank account, you can get a prepaid card, and the funds will get loaded on the card. There's a clear benefit to the government. They save a ton of money. The U.S. Treasury has said they'll save $1 billion over 10 years by getting out of the check writing business. It's 10 cents to push a transaction. It's $1.25 to write a check. That gives the federal government more money to invest in things that we would like them to invest in instead of mailing out checks. But there's a downstream benefit then for all those people who now have a digital payments instrument. One, they're creating the data footprint that's so important to all of us to be able to have a record of who we are and how we spend money, to establish a credit history and a credit record, and ultimately get access to other kinds of financial services products. It gives them access to the conveniences and the enhanced productivity that we all realize, all of us who carry electronic payments products realize but don't appreciate. And I'll tell you as an aside, a number of our team members with partners of ours in the prepaid space each year spend a day in the Bronx with no credit cards, no debit cards, no prepaid cards, and experience life what it's like when you don't have access to electronic payments products. And you spend a lot of time and money, because there's an increased cost in going to check cashing windows and standing in line to pay your bills at the counter, and things that you just forget. And those are really important benefits, but I wouldn't understate the importance of just the enhanced, increased level of dignity people have in feeling as though they've got the same products and the same opportunity to kind of engage in society as everybody else. And they're not having to sort of figure out how to navigate the system in a way that clearly makes them stand out.
So, as we sort of wind down here, give me some sense as to what's exciting for you on the horizon and what the message is you want people to have in terms of, again, helping us see sort of, I'm as a Canadian, where the puck's moving, and how we should be thinking about this, and some of the things that are on your radar right now.
Well, I would say certainly I think there's a growing sense, I hope there's a growing sense of I guess a combination of a sense of obligation and commitment and a sense of optimism in the corporate world around the role we can play in making the world a better place. And that it's not just the role of government, and in some cases government may not be doing what we think they should be doing, and there's a void to be filled in some cases. In other cases, there's a very fertile ground for partnership in working with government. And I just believe we're on the cusp of even greater opportunity to figure out ways to collaborate across the private sector, to take advantage of improvements in technology, to take advantage of the scale of the resources that we collectively bring, and use that to connect to our, not just our communities that are so important that we serve, but within our own organizations, to really change the tone and change the feel of the organization. I can tell you, just as a final point, I mentioned the different sort of financial return that we see on social impact initiatives, which we're totally comfortable with. The impact that we see that's not measurable, but is of far greater value, is the amount of pride that our employees feel, the passion and the commitment and the engagement, and feeling good about the brand of MasterCard and what we stand for and how we're being perceived in the world as a company that's trying to make a difference. The return on that is immeasurable, because the level of engagement and commitment and our ability to attract and retain talent can't be overstated.
Right. So good mission, good business. Thank you. Please join me in thanking Craig Vosburg, and thanks very much, everybody. Enjoy the rest of the conference.